Chapter 3: The European Union and Other International Organizations. As we have seen, one major trend in Britain is devolution, or the process of decentralizing the unitary state to share policy-making power with regional governments. Yet all the countries of Europe, including Britain, are deeply affected by a counter-trend: integration. Integration is a process that encourages states to pool their sovereignty in order to gain political, economic, and social clout. Integration binds states together with common policies and shared rules. The supranational organization that integrates the states of Europe is called the European Union. International organizations. International organizations have been around for some time now, but their nature is changing, with some real implications for the sovereignty of individual nation-states. Several countries formed the Concert of Europe in the early 19th century in an effort to restore balance of power after the fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. It was a voluntary agreement, and it did not prevent the outbreak of several limited wars. However, many scholars believe that the effort to balance power that the agreement sparked was at least partly responsible for the relative peace among quarrelsome European neighbors until World War I began in 1914. The war stimulated another more global effort to form a lasting international organization, and resulted in the creation of the League of Nations, whose fate was doomed with the outbreak of World War II in 1939. Even before the United States joined the war, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill agreed to try again when the war ended. In this spirit, the United Nations was formed in 1945. The United Nations. Only 49 nation-states signed the original Charter of the United Nations in 1945, but because many new nations have been created since then, the membership of the UN has grown to 193 by 2015. It has lasted for 70 years, and its membership makes it a truly global organization. Membership in the UN is voluntary, but it has some limited powers to force its members to abide by the organization's peacekeeping principles. As a result, it plays an important role in geopolitics, and changes the dynamics of international relationships from the previous, almost exclusive focus on nation-states as individual actors on the world stage. The UN encourages collective action, but it alters the nature of national sovereignty only in limited ways. An important power of the UN is that its members can vote to establish a peacekeeping force in a hotspot that requests states to contribute military forces. The body responsible for making this decision is the Security Council, and any one of its 5 permanent members, the US, Britain, France, China, and Russia, may veto a proposed peacekeeping action. During the era of the Cold War, the Security Council was often in gridlock because the US and Russia almost always disagreed. Today, that gridlock is broken, but it is still difficult for all 5 countries to agree on a single course of action. Peacekeeping forces have been sent to calm warring forces in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Sub-Saharan Africa. UN forces are supposed to remain neutral, and they usually have restrictions on their rights to use weapons against either side in a dispute. Despite its limitations, the United Nations is a forum where most of the states of the world can meet and vote on issues without resorting to war. The UN is an umbrella organization that includes many sub-organizations that promote the general welfare of the world's citizens and monitor and aid world trade and other economic activities. These efforts are funded by membership dues and represent an extension of international cooperation into areas other than peacekeeping. Examples of such organizations are the World Bank, the International Court of Justice, and UNESCO, an Economic and Social Council. Other worldwide organizations. The United Nations continues to function as a major peacekeeping organization, although its authority is limited and its challenges are many. The organization's goals have broadened over the years, and other worldwide organizations have appeared in more recent years. 2 other important international organizations of the late 20th and early 21st centuries include the World Trade Organization. Established in 1995, the WTO is an organization of member states that have agreed to rules of world trade among nations. It is responsible for negotiating and implementing new trade agreements. It serves as a forum for settling trade disputes, and it supervises members to be sure that they follow the rules that the organization sets. Most of the world's trading nations belong to the WTO, with Russia joining the organization in 2012. The WTO oversees about 60 different agreements, which have the status of international legal texts that bind its 159 members. The process of becoming a WTO member is unique to each applicant country, and the terms of membership are dependent upon the country's stage of economic development and current trade regime. The process takes about 5 years, but it can last longer if the country's economic status is questionable, or if political issues make it objectionable. For example, China was denied WTO status for many years because of questions about human rights abuses, but its growing economic prowess finally influenced member states to approve it. The World Bank. Although the World Bank was created in 1944 to aid countries in rebuilding after World War II, its focus today is on loaning money to low and middle-income countries at modest interest rates. The bank's goals are to eliminate poverty in these countries and to support economic development through investment in projects that build businesses, improve transportation and communications, provide jobs, and eliminate corruption in government. The bank also has supported health initiatives such as vaccination programs for disease and research to combat AIDS, and efforts to reduce greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming. One of the strongest criticisms of the World Bank has been the way in which it is governed. While the World Bank represents 186 countries, a small number of economically powerful countries choose the leadership and senior management of the World Bank, and so critics say that their interests dominate the bank. Regional organizations. During the Cold War era, regional military alliances appeared, and countries joined based on their affiliation, either with the United States or Russia. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, formed in the late 1940s with 14 European members, the United States and Canada. An opposing alliance, the Warsaw Pact, began in 1955 and was composed of the Soviet Union and 6 Eastern European countries. Together, the two organizations were designed to maintain a bipolar balance of power in Europe. The Warsaw Pact disbanded with the breakup of the Soviet Union, and NATO expanded to include many of its former members. Other regional organizations include the Organization of American States, OAS, created to promote social, cultural, political, and economic links among member states. The Arab League, which was founded to promote the interests and sovereignty of countries in the Middle East, and the Organization for African Union, OAU, that has promoted the elimination of minority white rule governments in southern Africa. The number of regional international organizations has grown steadily over the past 70 years or so, but the one that has integrated states the most successfully so far is the European Union. The European Union. Europe's history is one of diverse national identities. Its wars have encompassed the continent as first its kingdoms and then its countries fought over religion, power, land, and trade. Perhaps most dramatically, its conflicts erupted in 2 devastating world wars during the 20th century. Shortly after World War II ended, European leaders decided on a new direction. Cooperation among nations led to the creation of the European Union, a supranational organization that has not supplanted nationalism, but has altered its members' policymaking practices substantially. A brief history. The organization began in an effort to revitalize a war-torn Europe after World War II ended. The most immediate need was to repair the nation's broken economies, so the initial goals were almost completely economic in intent. In 1949, the Council of Europe was formed, and although it had little power, it provided an opportunity for national leaders to meet. The following year, an international authority was formed to coordinate the coal and steel industries. Both damaged heavily during the war. Later evolutions of the new organization included the EEC, European Economic Community. The Treaty of Rome established the EEC, informally named the Common Market, in 1957. Its most important provisions called for the elimination of all bilateral tariffs between European nations and the creation of new ones that applied to all. The EC, European Community. Established in 1965, the EC expanded the organization's functions beyond economics. One major concern other than tariffs and customs was a unified approach to the peaceful use of atomic energy. However, the development of the EC was limited by disagreements as to how much power it should be given, with many nations concerned that their national sovereignty would be weakened. The urge toward integration was given a boost by the collapse of the Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s. With new democracies emerging, their transitions from communism to capitalism demanded guidance from an international regional power. The EU, European Union. The 1991 Maastricht Treaty created the modern organization and gave it authority in new areas, including monetary policy, foreign affairs, national security, transportation, the environment, justice, and tourism. An important goal was to coordinate economic policies, particularly through a common currency, the euro, to replace the national currencies of the member states, such as the French franc and the German mark, and a common European central bank with enormous supranational authority to influence the economic policies of the member states. The treaty established the three pillars or spheres of authority. 1. Trade and other economic matters, including economic and monetary union into a single currency and the creation of the European Central Bank. 2. Justice and home affairs, including policy governing asylum, border crossing, immigration, and judicial cooperation on crime and terrorism. 3. Common foreign and security policy, including joint positions and actions, and common defense policy. Membership. Ongoing expansion is a major characteristic of the European Union, with a total membership of 28 countries as of 2015. The European Union began with 6 members in 1957: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Denmark, Great Britain, and Ireland joined in the early 1970s, Greece in 1981, Portugal and Spain in 1986, and Austria, Finland, and Sweden in 1995. 10 countries joined on May 2, 2004. Cyprus, at least the Greek part, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia. Bulgaria and Romania joined in January 1, 2007. Enthusiasm for further growth has waned in recent years as questions of economic and political stability of newer members has threatened to break the Union apart. Even so, Croatia was admitted for membership in June 2013. Several countries are currently under consideration as candidates for membership, including Macedonia and Turkey. Turkey is controversial for many reasons, including its relatively low gross domestic product per capita of about €12,000, considerably less than the EU average. Turkey also has been questioned because of its history of authoritarian governments. Turkey's candidacy also brings up the question of whether or not it is actually a European country, since most of the country is technically in Asia. A deeper issue is the largely Muslim population of Turkey. If the EU is mainly an economic organization, then it shouldn't matter that all Turkey's religious leanings are quite different from those of current members, whose populations are overwhelmingly Christian. However, if the EU fulfills its other pillars, justice and home affairs and common foreign and security policy, some fear that religious differences could hinder the integration process. Even though the political and economic muscle of so many countries united is considerable, this rapid integration presents many difficult issues for the EU. First, organizational issues abound. Structures that work for 6 countries do not necessarily operate smoothly for 28. Second, the expansion brings in many former communist countries whose economies were relatively weak by the end of the 20th century. Older member states worry that immigrants from the East will flood their labor markets and strain their economies. EU supporters believe that these problems will be overshadowed by the benefits of common markets, currencies, political policies, and defense. In order to be accepted for membership, candidate nations must provide evidence to meet 3 important criteria: a stable, functioning democratic regime, a market-oriented economy, and a willingness to accept all EU laws and regulations. The rapid growth of the EU has brought about what some have called enlargement fatigue. Polls show a decline in support for enlargement among EU voters, and many believe that the French and Dutch rejections of the European Constitution partly reflected dissatisfaction over the 2004 enlargement. Also, many EU governments have lost their enthusiasm for further growth, particularly France, Germany, and Austria. The economic benefits of the recent expansions are still questionable, and the concerns surrounding Turkey have cooled some support. Of course, there is a limited amount of growth potential remaining because only a few countries of the continent are non-members, including Norway, Switzerland, the Balkan states, Belarus, Moldova, and Ukraine. Organization. The European Union is composed of four major bodies: the Commission, the Council of Ministers, the European Court of Justice, and the European Parliament. The Commission. This body currently has 28 members, one from each member state of the EU, supported by a bureaucracy of several thousand European civil servants. Each commissioner takes responsibility for a particular area of policy and heads a department called a Directorate General. The Commission is headed by a president, currently José Manuel Durão Barroso of Portugal. Although their home governments nominate them, commissioners swear an oath of allegiance to the EU and are not supposed to take directions from their national governments. The Commission forms a permanent executive that supervises the work of the EU, much in the way that a national cabinet operates. The Council of Ministers. Whereas the Commission acts cooperatively as the director of EU activities, the Council demonstrates the continuing power of the states. The Council consists of foreign ministers, finance ministers, the President of France, and all the prime ministers of other members. They hold frequent meetings, some for only one type of minister, and the heads of state meet every 6 months as the European Council. The Council is central to the EU's legislative process. Until 2009, the President of the Council rotated every 6 months, but the Lisbon Treaty made the position permanent and full-time, with a 2.5-year term of office, renewable once. The first president appointed under these conditions was Herman Van Rompuy of Belgium, who was appointed in 2012. In 2014, Donald Tusk, the former Polish Prime Minister, became the second president under the new rules. The Commission may initiate legislation, but its proposals don't become law until they've been passed by the Council. Each country is assigned a number of votes in proportion to its share of the population. The European Parliament. Contrary to the implications of its name, the European Parliament historically has not had a great deal of legislative power. However, since 1979, its members, MEPs, have been directly elected by the people of their respective countries, so they do have some independence from their national governments. Parliament may propose amendments to legislation, and it may reject proposals from the Council outright. However, the Council may override a rejection by a unanimous vote. EU citizens vote directly for representatives to the EP every 5 years. Apportionment of representatives is not strictly based on population, and smaller member states have disproportionately greater representation than larger ones. The meetings of the EP are held in Strasbourg, although committees meet in Brussels. The Lisbon Treaty enhanced the power of the EP significantly since new rules govern its relationship with the European Council. The European Court of Justice. The ECJ is the Supreme Court of the European Union and has the power of judicial review. It meets in Luxembourg, where it interprets European law, and its decisions may limit national sovereignty. For example, the ECJ ruled against Italy's policy of jailing illegal migrants who did not obey expulsion orders. In 2011, it decided that insurance companies in Britain were not allowed to charge women drivers, less of an accident risk, a lower premium than men. As such, the ECJ is more powerful than most national judicial systems of the EU's member states. It has a broad jurisdiction and hears cases that rule on disagreements among the commissioners, the Council of Ministers, and the members of Parliament. It also may settle disputes among member nations, private companies, and individuals. The ECJ consists of 28 judges, with each one nominated by a different member state. Cases are decided by a simple majority.